I was sitting in my car, across from the corner bistro on Oak Street, watching my wife, Sherry, kiss my best friend, Dev. Not a casual peck on the cheek, like old friends do, but a long, passionate kiss right on the mouth, the kind that makes you think they haven't seen each other in years. But I knew for a fact that Dev had been at our house literally 2 days ago, drinking sweet tea in our kitchen and telling jokes. You know that moment when the world doesn't stop abruptly, but starts to blur? Like you're looking at everything through a grimy window? That's exactly how it felt. The steering wheel under my palms got slick with sweat. The car smelled like stale tobacco and something sour, and the blood was pounding in my ears so loud I didn't hear the horn of a passing semi-truck right away. Welcome to my channel. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. My name is Marcus Mark Dubois. I'm 47 years old, and I'm a structural engineer at Precision Dynamics. I've worked honestly my entire life, paid my taxes, raised my daughter, and built a home. I want to tell you the story of how my life turned into a living hell in just 1 month. The people I trusted the most in the world turned out to be worse than any enemy, because an enemy, at least, doesn't pretend to love you. It all started 3 weeks ago. Just a regular Tuesday evening. Nothing special. I got home from work early. My boss let me off because we'd finished a project ahead of schedule. I figured I'd surprise Sherry. Maybe we could catch a movie or just take a walk. We'd been together for 22 years, but I still tried to do nice things for her. Stupid, right? When I unlocked the door, the house was silent. Sherry usually had the TV on or was listening to music. She loved that, but there wasn't a sound. I took off my shoes and walked into the kitchen. Empty. The dishes were clean, everything was tidied up. There was a note on the counter in her handwriting. Mark went to see a friend. Will be back late. Dinner in the fridge. It was a routine note. I'd seen hundreds of them over the years. But something felt off. I don't know exactly what it was. Maybe the fact that she never wrote, will be back late. She always gave a time. Or maybe it was that her cell phone was lying on the nightstand in the bedroom, and Sherry wouldn't even go to the corner store without her phone. I picked it up and unlocked it. I knew the code. We didn't hide anything from each other. That's what I thought. The last text message was from Dev. Waiting for you at 5:30 at the bistro. Don't be late. Sent an hour ago. And Sherry's response. Leaving now, my love? My love. That word dug into my brain like a rusty nail. Devon. Dev Sterling. My friend since the army. 25 years of friendship. He was the best man at our wedding, and the godfather of our daughter, Olivia. When my father passed away, Dev helped me with the funeral arrangements and loaned me money interest-free. And 7 years ago, when his business failed, I let him live with us for 3 months. I fed him and cared for him. We were like brothers. And now, my love. I didn't call. I didn't start yelling. I just grabbed my jacket, got into my car, and drove to that bistro. I knew the spot. It was a little place on Oak Street where Dev and I sometimes met up after work to grab a beer. I got there in about 15 minutes, parked a little ways down the block so I wouldn't be seen. I killed the engine and waited. My head was in such a fog that I didn't even know what I was going to do next. I just sat there, watching the entrance. Sherry appeared first. I recognized her immediately. in that red coat I had given her for her last birthday. She stood by the door, looking around, and she had an expression on her face that I hadn't seen in maybe 10 years. She was glowing, really glowing, like a girl on a first date. Then Dev walked up in that ridiculous leather jacket he thought was so fashionable. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulled her close, and they kissed. Long, passionate, right out in public, not caring who saw. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to jump out of the car, run over, and hit him, or her, or both of them. But I couldn't move. I just sat and watched as my wife and my best friend laughed and walked into the cafe. Like nothing was wrong. Like they had every right to do it. I stayed in the car for another 40 minutes. Then they came out. Dev was saying something, and Sherry was nodding. They walked to his SUV, and he opened the door for her like a true gentleman. I started the engine and followed them. I don't know why, I just followed. They drove slowly through the downtown streets. I kept my distance and tried not to be obvious. About 20 minutes later, they parked near an old 9-story apartment building in the suburbs. I knew that building. Dev's mother had lived there until she passed away about 4 years ago. The apartment had been empty ever since. Dev had always said he didn't want to rent it out. Too many memories. They went into the building, and I knew. This wasn't the first time. They had a little nest there, a place to meet. I waited until the light came on in one of the 5th floor windows. That was the apartment for sure. Then I turned around and drove home. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. A lump was stuck in my throat. Breathing was hard. And one thought kept spinning in my head. How long has this been going on? And the biggest question, why? Back at the house, I sat in the kitchen, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle. I didn't get drunk. I couldn't. My body just refused to accept it. Sherry got home around 11 o'clock that night, cheerful, rosy-cheeked. She walked into the kitchen, saw me with the bottle. "Mark, what's wrong? Did something happen?" "Nah," I said. "Everything's fine. Just tired." She nodded, kissed me on the forehead. I caught a whiff of some cologne I didn't recognize, and she went to the bedroom. I stayed put, wondering what to do next, because I couldn't just forget what I'd seen. For the next 3 days, I walked around in a fog. My colleagues at work asked if everything was okay, and I just nodded and smiled. At home, I pretended nothing had happened. Sherry acted normally, cooking, cleaning, talking about her day. I listened and wondered how she could do it. How could she sleep next to me, kiss me goodnight, and still meet up with another man? But I kept quiet, because I knew if I started asking questions now, she would just deny everything. I needed proof. Ironclad, irrefutable proof. On Friday evening, I told Sherry that I was heading up to Chris's cabin on Saturday, my buddy from way back, to help him patch his roof. She seemed pleased, maybe even too pleased. "That's great, Mark. Get some fresh air and rest." I nodded. Saturday morning, I packed a duffel bag just for show, said goodbye, and drove off. But not to Chris's. I went to a parking lot near our house. I parked where I could see our front door and waited. Sherry came out an hour later, dressed up, hair done, wearing that skirt she only wore for special occasions. She got on a bus at the stop. I started the car and followed, keeping my distance. She rode downtown and got off near the Grand Galleria Mall. I parked nearby and followed her on foot. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid she'd hear it. But Sherry walked quickly, not looking back, like someone who knows exactly where they're going. She went into the mall and took the elevator up to the third floor. The Skyline Room restaurant was up there, an expensive place I could never afford to take her to. I waited a minute and followed. The host met me at the entrance with a questioning look, but I waved him off, saying I'd find a table myself. I walked to a far corner where I could see the whole room. Sherry was sitting by the window, alone, waiting. Dev appeared about 10 minutes later, wearing a suit and tie, carrying a bouquet of roses. Roses? He brought her roses like she was his fiancée. Sherry laughed, took the bouquet, and smelled the flowers. He sat across from her and took her hand. They looked at each other in a way that made my insides clench. I took out my phone, turned on the camera, and started recording. My hands were shaking, and the image jumped, but I captured everything. Their smiles, their touches, a kiss across the table. A waiter brought them wine, an expensive bottle, judging by the label. Dev raised his glass and said something. Sherry laughed and clinked glasses with him. They drank and talked, and I could see this wasn't just a fling, not a random hookup. There was something real between them, or at least they thought so. I sat there for an hour while they ate, drank, and laughed. Then they paid and left. I waited a couple of minutes and followed. Outside, they got into Dev's SUV and drove toward the suburbs. I knew where they were going, back to that apartment in the 9-story building. I got into my car and followed. But this time, I didn't wait outside. When they entered the building, I parked and went inside too, taking the stairs up to the 5th floor. Dev's mother's apartment door was closed, but a sliver of light showed beneath it. I pressed my ear to the door. Music was playing softly inside. I heard voices and laughter. Then the music faded, and silence fell. The kind of silence that makes a normal man want to kick the door in. But I didn't kick it in. I just stood there in the stuffy hallway that smelled of cat urine and old paint, and I understood. This was real. This wasn't a nightmare or a hallucination. My wife was cheating on me with my best friend, and this wasn't the first time. A thought flashed in my mind. What if this has been going on for a long time? Years? What if, while I was grinding away at the factory, bringing home a paycheck, they were meeting up and laughing at me? I went downstairs, got into my car, and just sat there, not knowing what to do next. About 2 hours later, they came out. Dev drove Sherry back to our house. She got out, waved to him, and went inside. I waited another 20 minutes, then walked into the apartment. Sherry was sitting on the couch, watching a show. She saw me and smiled. "Mark, how was it? Did you help Chris?" I nodded. "Yeah, I helped. I'm tired. I'm going to take a shower." In the bathroom, I stood under the cold water until my skin started to burn. I thought about what to do. Divorce? A huge scene? A fight with Dev? Then I remembered something. A month ago, my aunt, Estelle Parker, my mother's sister, had passed away. She had no children, and she left all her property, a condo in downtown Atlanta and a lake house in the Blue Ridge Mountains, to me. The lawyer said the paperwork would take 1 or 2 months because the documents were old and needed verification, but in the end, I would inherit property worth about $12 million, maybe a little more. I had told Sherry about it, and she was thrilled. She said we could finally buy a bigger house and take a trip to the Caribbean. I agreed, thinking, this is it, our secure retirement. But now, I realized, she knew. Sherry knew I was about to become the owner of some serious real estate. And if we got divorced, she was legally entitled to half. $6 million. And what if we didn't get divorced, but I just died? Stop. I froze. No. Could they really be capable of that? I remembered how Sherry had been offering me blood pressure pills the last few weeks, though she never did that before. How she insisted I drink a nightcap, saying it was good for sleep. How she kept asking if I had signed the documents at the lawyer's office yet. The water poured over my head, and I stood there putting the pieces together. If they were serious about each other, if they were planning a future, my inheritance was a great start. But for that to happen, I had to either give it to her voluntarily, or I didn't want to think about the second option. But my brain was already working. I had to check this out. I had to find out what they were really planning. And most importantly, I needed to know how deep this went. I got out of the shower, dried off, and got dressed. Sherry was already asleep. I lay down next to her and turned off the light. She rolled over and hugged me. "Good night, Mark." I didn't say anything. I closed my eyes and started planning how I would catch them next, because I couldn't just leave anymore. I needed the truth, the whole truth. On Monday, I took 2 days off work. I told my boss I had thrown out my back and needed to see a doctor. He let me go, without question. I left the house in the morning, as usual, but instead of driving to the factory, I drove to Dev's place. I knew he worked from home until noon on Mondays. He had his own business, a large firm that supplied construction materials. He lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment on Park Avenue after his divorce from Tamara 5 years ago. I parked across from his building and waited. The weather was lousy. It was drizzling, and the sky was gray. The car smelled of old coffee from the thermos I'd brought. I sat there, looking at the second-floor windows where the light was on. I thought about how Dev and I used to go fishing together, how we went to basketball games and watched football. He was closer than a brother. And now, this brother was sleeping with my wife. And, it seemed, he was planning something with my money. Dev came out of the building around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, got into his SUV, and drove off. I followed, keeping my distance and trying not to look conspicuous. He drove slowly through familiar streets. 20 minutes later, he parked near a law office on Central Avenue, the same one where I was handling Aunt Estelle's estate paperwork. My stomach dropped. Is he going in there? Why? Dev got out of the car and went inside. I waited a minute, then got out too and walked up to the building. Through the glass door, I could see the reception area. Dev was standing at the administrator's desk, saying something. The woman was nodding and flipping through some papers. Then she pointed toward an inner office, and he walked in. I didn't go in. I went back to my car and waited. Dev came out about 40 minutes later. He had a satisfied look on his face. He was even whistling as he got into his SUV. I started the engine and kept following him. This time, he headed for the mall, the Grand Galleria, the same place he'd been with Sherry on Saturday. He went into a jewelry store on the first floor. I waited outside, then went in too, pretending to look at the displays. Dev was standing at the register, paying with a credit card. The saleswoman was putting something into a small red box. A ring. I saw it in gold, with a stone. An engagement ring. By the time he came out, the picture was crystal clear in my head. The lawyer's office. The ring. The meetings with Sherry. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future. Together, without me. And my inheritance was part of that plan. I remembered that in a divorce, a wife is entitled to half of the assets acquired during the marriage. But an inheritance is different. If I received it before the divorce, legally, it was my separate property. Sherry could only challenge it through the courts by proving she invested her own money or labor into the property, which she hadn't. That meant they needed something else. I drove home and started thinking. That evening, when Sherry got back from work, I asked her casually, "Hey Sherry, what do you think? If I get this inheritance, maybe I should write a will? Just in case, you know." She froze, with the knife over the carrots she was chopping for a salad. Then she turned to me and smiled. "Why, Mark? You're still young and healthy. It's too early to think about that." But I saw something flicker in her eyes. Alarm. I nodded. "You're probably right. Just thinking out loud." That night, after Sherry was asleep, I quietly got up and went to the living room. I turned on her laptop. She always forgot to shut it down. I knew the password. I opened the browser history. And that's when I saw the things that confirmed everything. Search queries from the past 3 weeks. How is inheritance divided in divorce? Can a wife claim a husband's inheritance? How to contest a will? Spouses share in statutory inheritance. The last query was 2 days ago. What happens to an inheritance if the husband dies before the paperwork is final? My hands started to shake. I closed the laptop and sat on the couch. The room was dark, with only the street light shining in the window. A faucet was dripping in the kitchen. I'd been meaning to fix it for ages, but I never got around to it. Now those sounds felt like a funeral bell. Sherry. Sherry was looking up what would happen to my inheritance if I died. Not if we divorced, but if I died. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was real life. I remembered the pills she had been giving me the last few weeks. She said they were heart vitamins, that I needed to take care of myself. I had swallowed them obediently every evening. Now I went to the Bower room, opened the medicine cabinet, and found the bottle of pills. The label said Cardiomagnol, a common blood thinner. But when I poured the pills into my palm, I saw that they were different. Some were white and round, as they should be, and others were slightly yellowish and oval. I picked up a yellow one and sniffed it. No smell. But my gut was screaming, "These aren't vitamins." The next morning, I called my friend Jamal. He's a pharmacist at the Union Street Pharmacy. I told him I'd found some old pills at home and wanted to check if they had expired. Jamal agreed to take a look. I drove over during my lunch break and handed him 3 of the yellowish pills. He turned them over in his hands, sniffed them, and then pulled out a reference book. After a couple of minutes, he looked up. "Mark, these are strong sleeping pills. They're called Ativan. It's prescription only. Where did you get these?" I lied, saying I found them in my father's old medicine cabinet. Jamal nodded. "Listen, don't take these just casually. This is serious stuff. You could easily overdose if you don't know the dosage, especially if you mix it with alcohol." I thanked him and walked outside. I stood on the pharmacy steps and smoked a cigarette, even though I'd quit 3 years ago. My hands were shaking so much I could barely light it. Sleeping pills. Sherry was slipping me sleeping pills under the guise of vitamins. Why? To make me sleep deeper so I wouldn't notice her leaving to meet Dev? Or to get my body used to the drug, and then give me a massive dose mixed with whiskey? Jamal said you could easily overdose. And lately, I really had been drinking a nightcap sometimes. Sherry would pour it herself and bring me the glass. A caring wife. I went home and started planning my next steps. Now I knew for sure this wasn't just cheating. It was a conspiracy. Sherry and Dev were planning to get rid of me. Maybe not kill me directly, but make it look like I died by accident. An overdose. A heart attack. Who would question it? And then Sherry, as the legal widow, would get the entire inheritance and marry Dev. A beautiful, almost perfect plan, if I hadn't figured them out early. For the next few days, I acted like everything was normal. I left for work in the morning and came back in the evening. I ate dinner with Sherry and watched TV. The pills she offered me, I no longer swallowed. I spit them into the sink in the bathroom and flushed them down the toilet. She didn't notice. She was too preoccupied with her own plans. In the evenings, she started going into the other room more often, talking on the phone in a whisper. I heard snippets of phrases. It'll all be ready soon. We just have to wait a little longer. I love you too. On Wednesday evening, something happened that completely opened my eyes. Sherry left for the grocery store, saying she needed to buy food. I was home alone and remembered her laptop. I opened it again and logged into her email. She hadn't changed the password either. We trusted each other, after all. In the sent folder, I found an email to Dev from 2 days prior. Subject: The Plan. I opened the email and started reading. Dev, I've thought everything through. The lawyer said the inheritance documents will be ready by the end of the month. That gives us 2 more weeks. Mark needs to sign the deed over to me during that time. I'll figure out how to convince him. I'll tell him it's better for the taxes to do it this way. He doesn't know anything about that stuff. If he refuses, then it's option B. You remember what we discussed. The pills are working well. He sleeps like a log. We can up the dose and then pour the rest in his whiskey. The doctors will blame his heart. He had problems last year. The main thing is not to rush. It has to look natural. And then we can finally be together, my love. I'm so tired of living with that whiner. You are everything to me. Kisses, your S. I reread the email 3 times. Every word hit me like a hammer. Whiner. She called me a whiner. Me, who had carried this family on my back for 22 years, grinding away at the factory, denying myself everything to make sure she was comfortable. Me, who loved her so much, I would have done anything for her. And she thought I was a whiner, and was planning to kill me. Not just leave, not just divorce. Kill me. Option B. That was me, my death. I printed the email on the printer, folded the paper, and hid it in my jacket pocket. Then I closed the laptop and sat on the couch. It was hard to breathe. My chest was pounding so loudly, I was afraid my heart would give out. The irony was that Sherry and Dev were counting on exactly that, my weak heart. Last year, I had a bout of arrhythmia. The doctors warned me, you have to take care of yourself, no stress. I had been scared then, and started looking after my health. Now I realized that this diagnosis had made me the perfect target. He died of a heart attack. Who would dig deeper? No one. When Sherry returned from the grocery store, I helped her put the food away. She was cheerful, even humming to herself. Mark, let's make some dumplings tonight, like we used to. Remember? I nodded. Let's do it. We sat in the kitchen, making the dumplings. She told me some story about a colleague at work and laughed. I looked at her hands. The same hands that just yesterday had been adding sleeping pills to my vitamins. The same hands that were soon supposed to pour me a glass of whiskey with an increased dose of Ativan. And those hands were now making dumplings like nothing was wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Sherry, listening to her breathing and thinking about what I should do next. I could go to the police, but what would I tell them? Show them the email? They'd say it was a domestic dispute. Handle it yourselves. Until there's a body, until a crime has been committed, the police won't move. When it happens, it will be too late. I could leave, file for divorce. But then Sherry would use the courts to claim half of the inheritance. Lawyers would help her find loopholes, and I wouldn't get justice. They would simply go unpunished. No, I wanted something else. I wanted them to know they'd been found out, to feel the same fear I felt when I realized they want to kill me. I wanted to destroy their plan in a way they would regret for the rest of their lives. And then I got an idea. The next day, I took another day off and went to see a private investigator. I found an ad online for a firm called Guardian Agency that specialized in domestic cases. I met with the detective, a man in his 50s with tired eyes. I told him everything. I showed him the printout of the email and the pictures I had taken near the restaurant and Dev's apartment. The detective listened and nodded. I see. You need evidence for court? I shook my head. No, I need you to follow them. Record all their meetings, their conversations. I need to know when they plan to act, exactly when they decide to move to option B. The detective quoted a price, $100,000 for a week of work. I didn't have that kind of money, but I agreed. I took out a loan from the bank and signed the contract. The detective started working the next day. He set up listening devices in Dev's apartment. He followed Sherry, documenting their meetings. Every evening, I received reports, photos, audio recordings of their conversations. And with each passing day, the picture became clearer. Dev really had consulted with a lawyer, asking how quickly he could transfer the inheritance to Sherry's name if the husband agreed. The lawyer explained that they would need a quitclaim deed certified with my signature. Dev then asked, and if the husband dies before the paperwork is final, who gets the property? The lawyer answered, the legal spouse, unless there is a will leaving it to someone else. Dev thanked her and left. The detective recorded the entire conversation. Sherry wasn't sitting still either. She met with Dev almost every day after work. They discussed the details. In one of the recordings, Dev said, "Look, maybe we shouldn't mess with the pills. It's a huge risk. What if someone investigates?" And Sherry replied, "They won't investigate. He has a bad heart. Everyone knows that. Plus, I'll cry so convincingly that no one will doubt it. The main thing is not to overdo the dosage. It has to look like a natural death in his sleep." I listened to that recording in my car, in the parking lot near the house, and tears streamed down my face. Not from pain, but from rage. 22 years. 22 years I lived with this woman. I had a child with her, made plans, shared joys and sorrows. And she sat there, calmly discussing how to kill me, as if they were talking about what to buy for dinner. By the end of the week, I had a complete picture of their plan. The detective brought me a folder full of materials, photos, audio recordings, and printouts of texts. Everything was documented. Dev and Sherry planned to act in 10 days, as soon as the lawyer finalized the inheritance documents. First, Sherry would try to persuade me to sign the deed over to her. If I refused, they would move to option B. On Friday evening, when I usually had a drink after the work week, Sherry would give me an increased dose of the sleeping drug along with my whiskey. Dev would wait in his SUV nearby in case something went wrong. In the morning, Sherry would call 911, saying I wasn't waking up. The doctors would declare death from heart failure, compounded by alcohol intoxication. Funeral, widow's tears, condolences, and a couple of months later, a wedding with Dev. An ideal plan, almost. Because they didn't know one thing. I had figured them out. And now, I had my own plan. I called my attorney, Reginald Hayes, whom I had met while handling the estate. I went to his office with the folder of evidence. He listened to me, looked at the documents, and heard the recordings. Then he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. Mr. Dubois, this is serious. Very serious. This is attempted murder, a threat to your life. You need to go straight to the police. I nodded. I understand, but I want to do something first. I want to catch them in the act, so there are no excuses. No, we were just talking. No, it was a joke. Reginald Hayes frowned. That's a dangerous game. What if something goes wrong? I looked him in the eye. Then something goes wrong. But I have to try. We worked out a strategy. Reginald contacted a detective he knew on the force and explained the situation. The officer agreed to help unofficially until there was direct evidence. We made an arrangement. On the night Dev and Sherry planned to execute their scheme, a hidden camera would be installed in the apartment. The private detective would put it in place that morning, pretending to be a meter reader checking the utility box. I would tell Sherry that an electrician had come by. The camera would record everything. Sherry adding the pills to my glass, calling Dev, and both of them coming to check if I was dead. I wouldn't drink what she gave me. I would pretend to drink, but spit it out. Then I would pretend to lose consciousness. And when they were both in the apartment, when they thought they had succeeded, I would get up and turn on the lights, and the police would walk in right after. The risk was enormous. Sherry might suspect of something. Dev might get scared at the last minute and call it off. The camera might fail. But I had no other option. I wanted them caught. I wanted them to see their dream crumble with their own eyes, to understand that I wasn't the fool they took me for. A week passed. The lawyer called and told me the documents were ready. I could come and pick them up. The inheritance, Aunt Estelle's condo in Atlanta and the lake house in the Blue Ridge Mountains, was officially in my name. Total value, given current market prices, was about $13 million. I thanked her and hung up. That evening, Sherry asked, "Mark, how's the inheritance? Is the paperwork done yet?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm picking up the documents tomorrow." She smiled. "Good. You know, I was thinking, maybe we should transfer the condo straight into my name. It would be better for tax reasons. You don't really understand these things, but I read up on it. We could save a lot." There it was. Option A, the quitclaim deed. I looked at her and said, "Sherry, let me talk to my lawyer first. Okay, just in case there are any hidden snags." Her face tightened for a second, but she quickly recovered. "Of course, Mark. Whatever you say. Talk to him. Just don't drag it out, or they'll start charging taxes." I knew that was the last attempt to do it the easy way. Since I wouldn't agree to the deed, they would move to option B, murder. The detective confirmed my fears the next day. He intercepted a conversation between Sherry and Dev. She called him from work. Her voice was sharp and angry. "He refuses to sign the deed. He says he's going to consult his lawyer. Damn it, Dev. If the lawyer explains what's what, the whole thing will fall apart. We have to move fast. Let's do it Friday. You remember the plan?" Dev was silent for a moment. Then he replied, "I remember. Are you sure it'll work?" Sherry scoffed. "I'm sure. I told you. His heart is weak. Pills plus whiskey, and it's done. The main thing is to get the dose right. I've already measured it. It'll be clean." I listened to that recording in the detective's office, clutching my hands so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. She measured the dose. My wife was sitting there, measuring the amount of pills it would take to kill me. Carefully, methodically, like a school assignment. And yet, every evening, she would kiss me goodnight and say, "Love you, Mark," and tuck me in. How could someone be like that? How could one person contain Such a lie. The detective put a hand on my shoulder. Mr. Dubois, it's not too late to stop this. Go to the police right now. These recordings are enough to arrest them. I shook my head. No. They'll say it's just talk, fantasies, that they never really intended to do anything. No. I need them to start acting. I need them caught red-handed. Only then will they have no way out. Friday came quickly. In the morning, the detective came to our apartment, disguised as an electrician. Sherry was at work. He installed a miniature camera in the corner of the living room behind the bookshelf. It had a clear view of the entire table, the couch, and the entrance to the kitchen. He checked the sound. It worked perfectly, and gave me a small remote. When you're ready, press this button. The signal will go to the officers. They'll be waiting outside. As soon as you press it, they'll come up. 3 minutes max. I nodded. Thank you. That evening, Sherry came home cheerful. Too cheerful. Brought groceries and started making dinner. Mark, let's celebrate your inheritance tonight. A few drinks. You love to relax on Fridays, don't you? I agreed. She took a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet, poured 2 glasses, one for herself, one for me, and sat across the table. To you and to your inheritance. We clinked glasses. I raised the glass to my lips and pretended to take a huge gulp, but I clenched my lips shut. The whiskey trickled onto my shirt. Sherry didn't notice. She was looking out the window. Then she stood up. Mark, I need to use the restroom. And she left. I quickly dumped the contents of my glass into a flower pot on the windowsill and then poured fresh, clean whiskey from the bottle. When Sherry returned, I was already back in my seat. She looked at my empty glass and smiled. Another one? I agreed. We sat at the table and drank. Sherry kept pouring for me, encouraging me. Go on, Mark. Relax. You deserve it. I pretended to drink, but each time I secretly poured the whiskey, either into the flower pot or into the pocket of my jacket, which I had deliberately hung on the back of my chair. There was an empty flask in there. Sherry didn't notice. She was too focused on her plan. After the 4th drink, I began to act drunk. I spoke slowly, swaying in my chair. Sherry watched me closely, evaluating. See? Are you okay? Maybe a little too much? I shook my head. No, I'm good. Just tired. I think I'll lie down. Perfect, honey. Go lie down and rest. I'll finish up the dishes and be right there. I stood up, deliberately stumbling as I walked to the bedroom. I lay on the bed, on top of the covers, and closed my eyes. I heard Sherry in the living room pull out her phone. A whisper. Dev. Yeah, everything's going according to plan. He's almost out. Come over in an hour, quietly, use the back entrance. Remember the key in the mailbox, like we agreed? A pause. Yes, I'm sure. It'll all be over soon. Finally. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was afraid she would hear it. But Sherry didn't come near me. She moved around the apartment, tidying up, putting things away, as if preparing for guests, or maybe a funeral. Then she came into the bedroom. I lay motionless, breathing deeply and evenly. She leaned over me, listening to my breathing. Mark, softly, cautiously. I didn't answer. She waited another minute, then left. I heard the click of the front door lock. She was gone. I opened my eyes, got up, and went to the window. Outside in the courtyard, the detective's car was parked with tinted windows. Next to it were 2 other unmarked police cars. The officers were waiting for the signal. I went back to the living room and checked the camera. The indicator light was blinking green. It was recording. I sat on the couch and waited. Time dragged on painfully. Every minute felt like an hour. I stared at the door, thinking, What if they don't come? What if Dev gets scared at the last minute? But no, they would come. They had gone too far to back down now. $13 million was too big a prize to give up. 40 minutes later, I heard the sound of a key in the lock. The door opened quietly. Dev walked in. He was wearing a dark jacket, and his face was tense. He looked around, listened, then pulled out his phone and typed a message. A minute later, Sherry came in. She was pale, but composed. Well, is he sleeping? Dev nodded. They walked into the bedroom. I heard their footsteps, their whispers, and then Sherry's voice, louder. Damn it! He's not breathing. Dev, check his pulse. A momentary pause. Then Dev's voice, scared. Sherry, there's no pulse at all. He's dead. Sherry exhaled. Yes. Thank God. I thought it wasn't going to work. The dose must have been right. Dev, help me. We have to put him back in bed, so it looks like he just fell asleep and didn't wake up. They came out of the bedroom. Sherry first. Dave right behind her. And that's when I stood up from the couch and flipped the light switch. Hello? Were you looking for me? Sherry froze. Her face went white, her eyes wide. She opened her mouth, but couldn't make a sound. Dev staggered back a step, tripping over the rug. Mark, you're okay? I smiled, though I was burning up inside. I'm great, Dev. Turns out I'm not the fool you thought I was. I don't swallow the pills that people slip me. I don't drink the whiskey that people lace with sleeping drugs. And I certainly don't die that easily. Sherry took a step toward me. Mark, honey, what are you talking about? What pills? I was just worried about your health. I raised my hand, stopping her. Stop, Sherry. Stop lying. I know everything. About you and Dev, about your meetings, about the plan to take my inheritance, about option B if I didn't sign the deed. I know everything. Dev paled. Mark, brother, this is a misunderstanding. We can explain everything. I laughed. Brother? You call me brother, Dev, after sleeping with my wife? After planning to kill me? What kind of brother are you? You're a traitor. You're both traitors. Sherry's expression changed. Fear turned to anger. You were listening to us? Spying on us? How dare you? I looked at her with amazement. How dare I? Seriously? You plan to murder me? And I don't have the right to defend myself? Sherry, do you even hear what you're saying? She stepped closer. Her voice became harsh. And what did you expect? That I'd live in poverty my whole life? That I'd settle for your engineer's meager paycheck? Dev gives me what you never could, a decent life. And now, the inheritance is here. And I have a right to it. I'm your wife. I lived with you for 22 years. That money should be mine. The silence in the room became absolute. Even the lawyers froze. The judge looked at Sherry. Ms. Dubois, you just admitted you wanted to take possession of your husband's property. Sherry stopped, realizing she had said too much. I didn't mean that. The judge shook her head. The record will reflect your words. This session is adjourned. I listened to her, barely believing it. There she was, the real Sherry, without the mask, without the pretense, greedy, vicious, ready to kill for money. 22 years. I lived with this woman and didn't know her. Didn't know her at all. Dev tried to take control of the situation. Mark, let's calm down. Let's sit and talk, like adults. Maybe we can reach an agreement? I shook my head. An agreement? About what, Dev? About how you were going to split me up? About how many pills it takes to kill a man? Or about how you would comfort my widow after the funeral? Sherry suddenly rushed at me, screaming and waving her arms. You ruined everything. Everything. We could have been happy. We could have lived a decent life. And you were always a failure, a whiner. I hate you. I hate you. Dev tried to hold her back, but she broke free. You were supposed to die, you hear me? You were supposed to. It was the only way. I pressed the button on the remote. 30 seconds later, the door flew open. 3 men in plain clothes walked in. Police! Hands on your heads! Sherry and Dev froze. The camera in the corner kept recording. Everything had been recorded. Every word, every confession. The officer came up to me. Mr. Dubois, are you okay? I nodded, though my whole body was shaking. Yes, I'm okay. Sherry and Dev were separated and handcuffed. Sherry was crying, yelling that it wasn't true, that I had set her up. Dev was silent, looking at the floor. The senior officer pulled out his recorder. I need to record your statement. Tell me everything from the beginning. I sat on the couch and started talking. I told them about the pills, the surveillance, the plan to kill me. I showed them the printed emails and the photos. The officer recorded and nodded. When I finished, he looked at Sherry and Dev. You are under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder. Anything you say can and will be used against you. They were taken to the precinct that same night. Sherry screamed until the very end, demanding a lawyer and accusing me of provocation. Dev was silent. Just before he was led away, he turned and looked at me. There was no remorse or shame in that look. Only cold, quiet anger, the anger of a man who was caught. I was left alone in the apartment. The officers took the camera, the recordings, and all the materials from the private investigator. They said the case would be handed over to a prosecutor, and I would be called in for questioning in a couple of days. I nodded, closed the door behind them, and sat down on the floor in the hallway. The silence was deafening. I sat on the cold floor, my back against the wall, unable to believe what had happened. 22 years of marriage ended like this. An arrest, handcuffs, and charges of attempted murder. 25 years of friendship turned into betrayal. A conspiracy, a desire to kill me. How was that possible? When did it all go wrong? Did I miss some signs? Should I have noticed earlier that Sherry was unhappy? That Dev was looking at her as more than a family friend? No, it wasn't my fault. This was their choice, their decision. I was just a regular husband, a regular friend. I worked, brought home money, and took care of my family. I didn't drink, cheat, or hit her. What were they missing? Money. But we lived fine. We weren't rich, but we had everything we needed. Maybe love? But I loved Sherry. I loved her for 22 years. I told her so. I gave her gifts and spent time with her. And she? She had been lying for years, perhaps pretending to be happy, kissing me, sleeping with me, and all that time planning how to get rid of me. I got up, went into the bedroom, and opened Sherry's closet. Dresses, blouses, shoes, everything neatly hung, sorted by color. She had always been meticulous. I grabbed the red coat, the one she wore to meet Dev. The fabric felt soft. It smelled like her perfume. I crushed the coat in my hands and threw it on the floor. Then I pulled out everything else. Dresses, skirts, sweaters. I threw them on the floor and stomped on them. In that moment, I wanted to destroy everything that reminded me of her, to burn it, tear it up, throw it away, erase those 22 years like a bad dream. But then I stopped, sat down on the bed among the piles of clothes, and cried. Not from pain, not from resentment, but from exhaustion, from the relief that I didn't have to pretend to be strong anymore. I could just sit and cry, and no one would see. I cried for a long time, until my tears ran out. Then I washed my face with cold water and put everything back in the closet. Tomorrow I would donate it to charity. Maybe someone else could use it. In the morning, Olivia, our daughter, called. She's 24 and lives in New York City, working as a manager for some company. We haven't been very close these last few years. She left after college and rarely comes home. Dad, is it true? Kate called me. She said Mom was arrested. What's going on? Her voice was trembling. She was scared. I sighed. Liv, come home. It's better if we talk face to face. She was silent for a few seconds. Okay. I'll be there tomorrow evening. The next 2 days passed in a blur. I went to the police station for questioning, gave statements, and signed transcripts. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, listened to me carefully. Mr. Dubois, you understand that this is a very serious charge. Attempted murder carries a sentence of up to 15 years in federal prison. I nodded. I understand, but I have proof. All the recordings, the texts, the detective's testimony. She looked at the case files and shook her head. Yes, the evidence is sufficient, more than sufficient. The question is different. Why didn't you go to the police immediately when you found out about the affair? I paused. A good question. Why? Maybe because I didn't believe it would escalate to murder. Or because I wanted to catch them red-handed so there would be no excuses. Or maybe I was just afraid to admit to myself that 22 years of my life had been a lie. I don't know, I said. I guess I was hoping I was wrong. That it was just cheating, not a conspiracy. The prosecutor nodded. I understand. Well, now we'll check everything. Your wife and her accomplice are denying the charges so far. They say it was a setup, that you orchestrated the whole thing. I laughed. Orchestrated? I have their texts discussing how to kill me. I have a recording of Sherry saying she measured the dose of sleeping drug. I have a video of her adding pills to my glass. What else do you need? The prosecutor shrugged. Their lawyers will try to contest everything. They'll say the recordings are fabricated, that it's all edited. But don't worry, we have enough material for an indictment. The case will go to trial. Olivia arrived the following evening. I met her at the train station. She got off the train pale, with red eyes, and hugged me silently. We got into the car and drove home. On the way, I told her everything. About the affair, the plan, the arrest. Olivia listened quietly, only sniffing occasionally. When I finished, she asked softly, Dad, are you sure? Maybe it's a misunderstanding? Maybe Mom really was just worried about your health? I pulled the car over and looked at her. Liv, I have an email from your mother where she writes to Dev that I'm a whiner who needs to be gotten rid of. I have a recording where she discusses a dose of a sleeping drug sufficient to kill me. I have a video of her adding pills to my glass. This is not a misunderstanding. This is attempted murder. Olivia started crying. But she's my mom. How could she? I hugged her. I don't know, honey. I don't know. People change, or maybe we never really knew them. Olivia clung to me, sobbing uncontrollably. I stroked her hair and thought, here's another victim of their plan. A daughter who has now lost her mother, who will live with this stigma for the rest of her life. The daughter of a woman who tried to murder her own husband for money. At home, Olivia went to her room and locked the door. I could hear her crying behind the door. But I didn't bother her. She needed to get through this on her own. I sat in the kitchen, made tea, and stared out the window at the dark yard and the lights of the neighboring houses. I thought about what would happen next. Trial, verdict, prison, divorce, division of assets. Although after the verdict, Sherry was unlikely to get anything. By law, if a spouse is convicted of a crime against the other spouse, they lose the right to inheritance and division of property. That meant the $13 million would stay with me. The irony of fate. They wanted that money so badly, they lost everything. A week later, I received a summons for the trial. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the 20th. Reginald Hayes called and said Sherry and Dev's defense would be built on the argument that I had provoked them and set up a trap. That there was no real intent to kill me, just emotional talk. Mr. Dubois, prepare yourself. It's going to be unpleasant. They'll try to portray you as a paranoid man who spied on his wife out of jealousy and made the whole thing up. I scoffed. Made up the emails? Made up the recordings of the conversations? Made up the video of Sherry dropping pills into my glass? Reginald Hayes sighed. They'll say you falsified evidence, hired actors, and edited the video. In short, prepare for anything. Olivia left for New York 3 days later. Before she left, she stood in the doorway for a long time, hesitant to go. Dad, don't blame me for not believing you right away. I hugged her. Liv, you're my daughter. No matter what happens, I'll always be on your side. And I understand. It's hard to believe your mother is capable of something like that. She nodded, sniffling. I'll come visit. I'll come to the trial too. I want to hear what she says. I want to look her in the eye. The days dragged on slowly. I went to work, performing my duties mechanically. My colleagues already knew what had happened. News travels fast in our small town. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with curiosity. Still others whispered behind my back. I tried to ignore it. In the evenings, I sat at home alone, staring out the window. Sometimes the detective would stop by, bringing updated materials and sharing new information. It turned out Sherry and Dev had been meeting for 2 years. 2 years of deception, lies, and a double life. 2 years she had come home from his bed and kissed me, cooked dinner, and pretended to be happy. The detective told me something else interesting. Mr. Dubois, I looked into your wife's finances. It seems that for the last 6 months, she was regularly withdrawing money from your joint account. Small amounts, $10,000 to $15,000 at a time, but frequently. It added up to about $300,000 over 6 months. I looked up. What was she spending it on? The detective shrugged. Based on the bank statements, jewelry stores, expensive restaurants, hotels, she was preparing for her new life with Dev, saving up, so to speak. $300,000. That was almost half of my yearly salary. I was toiling away at the factory, bringing every dime home, and she was taking the money and spending it on her lover, on their joint romantic evenings, on rings, on hotels, and I hadn't noticed anything. I just believed she was spending it on herself, on makeup, on clothes. How blind I had been. On the 20th, I went to the courthouse. It was an old, Soviet-era building with peeling paint on the walls and creaky wooden benches. The crowd was small, just the participants in the trial and a few local newspaper reporters. I sat on the back bench and waited for the start. Reginald Hayes sat next to me, flipping through papers. 10 minutes later, Sherry and Dev were brought in. They were handcuffed and wearing prison uniforms. Sherry had lost weight and looked worn out. Her hair was messy. Dev didn't look well either. His cheeks were sunken and his eyes were red. They sat down on the defendant's bench without looking in my direction. The judge entered, a strict woman in her 50s with gray hair. All rise. This court is in session. Everyone stood up. The judge sat down, put on her glasses, and looked at the documents. We are hearing the case of the prosecution of citizens Sherry Dubois and Devin Sterling on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. Prosecutor, your opening statement. The prosecutor, a young man in his 30s, stood up. Your Honor, the prosecution believes that the defendants, Dubois and Sterling, planned the murder of Ms. Dubois's husband, Marcus Dubois, between March and April of this year, with the intent of taking possession of his inheritance. We have irrefutable evidence, texts, audio recordings of conversations, and a video recording showing the defendant Dubois adding sleeping drugs to the victim's drink. We also have the testimony of a private investigator and the pharmacist's statement about the composition of the pills. We ask the court to find the defendants guilty and sentence them to a term of imprisonment of up to 12 years. Sherry's lawyer stood up, a man in his 40s in an expensive suit, looking confident. Your Honor, the defense considers the charges baseless. My client, Ms. Dubois, did indeed have a romantic relationship with Mr. Sterling, but there was no plan for murder. All so-called evidence is the result of provocation by the victim. He spied on his wife, recorded conversations without her consent, and staged the situation to make her look guilty. As for the pills, yes, my client gave her husband sleeping medication, but solely out of good intentions. He suffered from insomnia, and a doctor recommended a mild sedative. There was no lethal usage. This is all the invention of a jealous husband. I clenched my fists. Invention. He called the email where Sherry wrote about option B an invention. The judge looked at the lawyer. Do you have proof that the texts were falsified? The lawyer stammered. Your Honor, we requested a forensic analysis. The results will be ready in a week. The judge nodded. Very well. We will proceed to the questioning of the defendants. Ms. Dubois, please stand. Sherry stood up. Her face was pale, and her lips were trembling. The judge looked at her. Do you admit to being in a romantic relationship with Mr. Sterling? Sherry nodded. Yes, I do. But I did not plan to kill my husband. That's not true. The judge frowned. Then explain the phrase from your email. If he refuses to sign the deed, then it's option B, pills plus whiskey. Sherry hesitated. That was a joke. Dev and I were just fantasizing, like people sometimes joke and say, I could kill that person when they're angry. But it doesn't mean we were actually going to do it. The judge looked at her for a long time. A joke. You bought a prescription sleeping drug, mixed it into your husband's drink, and discussed specific deadlines and dosages with your lover. And all of that was a joke? Sherry started crying. I didn't want to kill him, I swear. I just wanted him to sleep more soundly so I could go out and meet Dev, and he wouldn't notice, that's all. The prosecutor stood up. Your Honor, we have a video recording where the defendants, Ms. Dubois and Mr. Sterling, after the victim pretended to be dead, discussed how to move his body onto the bed to make it look natural. I quote, thank God the dose was right. We have to put him back in bed so it looks like he just fell asleep and didn't wake up. That is not a joke. That is a confession. The judge played the video recording. Our living room appeared on the screen. The camera was angled, but everything was clearly visible. Sherry and Dev walk out of the bedroom. Sherry is pale, but there is relief in her eyes. Damn, he's not breathing. Dev, check his pulse. Dev leans over the empty bed. I had put pillows under the covers beforehand. Sherry, there's no pulse. He's dead. Sherry exhales. Yes, thank God. I thought it wasn't going to work. The dose must have been right. Silence fell in the courtroom. Everyone watched the screen. Sherry's lawyer turned pale. The judge stopped the recording and looked at the defendants. Is that also a joke? Sherry was crying, shaking her head. I don't know what to say. I panicked. I thought he was really dead, so I just said what came to mind. The judge frowned. You panicked that your husband was dead, and your first reaction was, thank God? Sherry didn't answer. She just sobbed into her hands. Dev was questioned next. He held himself together better than Sherry, but I could see how tense he was. Mr. Sterling, do you admit to helping Ms. Dubois plan the murder of her husband? Dev shook his head. No, Your Honor. I didn't plan a murder. Sherry and I were meeting, that's true. But the talks about Mark's death were just fantasies. We discussed how much easier it would be if he wasn't around, but we weren't going to do anything. And that night I came to the apartment just to check on Sherry. She called and said Mark wasn't waking up and asked me to help. I came over, and we discovered he seemed dead. That's all. The prosecutor stood up. Your Honor, we have recordings of telephone conversations between the defendants where they discuss specific details. I quote from the recording of April 17th. Sherry, are you sure it'll work? I'm sure. I told you. His heart is weak. Pills plus whiskey, and it's done. The main thing is to get the dose right. I've already measured it. We also have the testimony of the pharmacist, who confirmed that Ativan, in the dosage found in the defendant Dubois's bottle, when mixed with alcohol, can cause cardiac arrest. These are not fantasies. This is a specific plan for murder using medication. Dev's lawyer tried to object. Your Honor, the telephone recordings were obtained illegally. A private investigator did not have the right to bug my client's phone without a court order. The judge looked at the prosecutor. The prosecutor nodded. The recordings were indeed obtained by a private investigator at the victim's request. But according to the Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure, evidence obtained in violation of the law may be deemed admissible if it is corroborated by other materials in the case. We have the video recording, the texts, and witness testimony. All of this, in combination, proves the defendant's guilt. The judge thought for a moment, then nodded. Very well. The recordings will be accepted as additional evidence. We will proceed to the questioning of the victim. Mr. Dubois, please stand. I stood up and approached the stand. My heart was racing, and my hands were sweating. The judge looked at me. Tell us in your own words what happened. I started talking. I told them how I noticed the affair, how I started tracking them, how I discovered the murder plot, how I found the pills in the vitamin bottle, how I learned from the pharmacist that they were sedatives, how I hired the detective, how I gathered the evidence, and how on that night I pretended to drink the whiskey with the pills and waited for them to come and check if I was dead. Sherry's lawyer stood up. Mr. Dubois, you claim you feared for your life, yet you didn't go to the police, but set up a trap. Why? I looked at him. Because I knew that without direct evidence, the police wouldn't do anything. Texts, conversations, all of that could be dismissed as fantasy or a joke. I needed to catch them at the moment they were actually trying to kill me. Only then could I be sure they would be punished. Did it not occur to you that this was dangerous? That you were risking your life? I chuckled. It occurred to me. But what was I supposed to do? Wait for them to actually poison me? Hope they would change their minds? No, I decided to act, and I don't regret it. The lawyer sat down. The judge looked at Sherry. Ms. Dubois, do you have anything to add? Sherry stood up, her face wet with tears. Your Honor, I admit I was wrong. I cheated on my husband. I discussed different scenarios with Dev. But I swear, I was not going to actually kill him. I just wanted to scare him into signing the deed so we could divorce and I could get my share, but never murder. If I couldn't help myself, I stood up. Sherry, you slipped me sleeping pills for 2 weeks straight. You bought them with a prescription from your doctor friend. You measured a dose sufficient to kill me, and then you discussed with Dev how to move my body onto the bed to make it look natural. And you say you weren't going to kill me. You're lying. You've always been lying. The judge banged the gavel.
Mr. Dubois, calm down, sit down. I sat, breathing heavily. Sherry looked at me with hatred. Yes, I wanted your money because I deserved it. 22 years I lived with you, putting up with your meager paycheck. You're whining. I had a right to a better life. And you? You worked like a dog and couldn't give me anything. Dev, at least, treated me like a woman, not a housekeeper. The judge looked at Sherry. Ms. Dubois, you just admitted you wanted to take possession of your husband's property. Sherry faltered, realizing she had said too much. I didn't mean that. The judge shook her head. The record will reflect your words. The session is adjourned. The verdict will be announced in 1 week. Everyone left. Sherry and Dev were led away. I remained sitting on the bench, unable to move. Reginald Hayes placed a hand on my shoulder. Mr. Dubois, you did great. You stood your ground. Now all that's left is to wait for the verdict, but I think it will be severe. Her own words condemned her. A week later, the judge delivered the verdict. The court finds Sherry Dubois and Devin Sterling guilty of conspiracy to commit murder with the intent of taking possession of property. The court imposes the following sentence. Ms. Dubois is sentenced to 11 years of incarceration in a federal penitentiary. Mr. Sterling is sentenced to 10 years of incarceration in a federal penitentiary. Furthermore, Ms. Dubois is stripped of the right to any division of marital property and the right to inherit the victim's property. The verdict was final. Sherry screamed and fell to her knees. Dev stood silently, looking at the floor. They were led away. I walked out of the courtroom. Outside, it was a bright, sunny day. Reginald Hayes shook my hand. Justice has prevailed for you. Now go live your life peacefully. I nodded, although I felt no peace, only emptiness. 6 months have passed. The divorce was finalized quickly. After the verdict, the court didn't drag out the formalities. Sherry is in prison somewhere in West Virginia. Dev is in a different region. I received all on the documents for Aunt Estelle's condo in Atlanta and the lake house in the Blue Ridge Mountains, $13 million in real estate. The very money they were willing to kill me for. Now, it was all mine. But I felt no joy. I sold the downtown condo for $9 million. Too many memories were tied to that whole awful story. I kept the lake house. At least there, I could escape the city hustle. With the money I made, I did something I had long dreamed of, but never dared to do. I bought a small house in the suburbs with a yard and a garden. The place is quiet, peaceful. The neighbors are older and friendly. No one pries into my business. I can just live there without looking back at the past. Olivia comes to visit once a month. We walk in the garden and talk about life and her job in New York. She tries not to mention Sherry, but I can see it's hard for her. A daughter can't just throw her mother out of her heart, even if that mother turned out to be a criminal. One day, Olivia asked, "Dad, have you forgiven her?" I paused. Forgiven? I don't know, Liv. To forgive means to forget the injury, to let go of the anger,
And I don't feel anger, only sadness. Sadness that 22 years of my life were built on a lie, that the person I loved actually hated me. How do you forgive that? Olivia nodded. I understand. Are you going to visit her? I shook my head. No. Why? So she can accuse me again of ruining her life? So I can hear what a failure and whiner I am? No, thanks. Let her serve her time. Maybe she'll have a change of heart there, realize what she did, but I doubt it. I also quit my job at the factory. I no longer had the strength to go there every day, see the sympathetic looks of my colleagues, and hear the whispers behind my back. I opened a small repair shop for household appliances. I've always been good with my hands. I loved tinkering with mechanics. I have enough work. I live quietly, without excess, but with dignity. The money from the condo sale is in the bank. I decided not to touch it, to save it for Olivia's future. Maybe she can get something good out of this whole mess, at least. Sometimes in the evenings, I sit on the porch of the new house, drink tea, and watch the sunset. I think about what happened. I try to understand where I went wrong. Maybe I should have spent more time with Sherry, earned more money, been more romantic, more attentive. But then I realize it wasn't about me. Sherry made her choice. She chose money over family, a lover over her husband, and crime over honesty. That's her decision, her responsibility. I just happened to be in the center of her plan. A month ago, a woman came into my shop. She was in her 40s, attractive, with a kind smile. She brought in a broken toaster and asked me to fix it. We started talking. It turned out she lives nearby and works as a teacher at the local school. Her name is Natalie. We've met a couple more times. She came to pick up the toaster, then brought an iron, and then just stopped by to say hello. I feel like I like her. Not the way I once liked Sherry, without passion, without stormy emotions, just a quiet, warm affection. Maybe that's what real feeling is, when you just feel good being around a person. Last week I invited Natalie over for tea. We sat on the porch and talked about life. She told me about the school, her students, and her garden. I listened and thought, this is how it should be. No lies, no secrets, no plans for murder for money. Just two people who feel good together. Before leaving, Natalie asked, Mark, can I come back again? I smiled. Of course. Come whenever you want. You know, I don't know what will happen next. Maybe Natalie and I will work out, or maybe we'll just remain friends. Maybe Sherry will have a change of heart in prison and ask for forgiveness, or maybe she'll get out in 11 years, just as bitter. Maybe Dev will wait for her, or maybe he'll find someone else. I don't know. And honestly, it doesn't matter to me anymore. What matters is that I survived, that I didn't give in to fear, that I didn't believe their lies, that I didn't let myself be killed, that I found the strength to gather the evidence, go through the trial, and stand firm. What matters is that now I live in my own house, I do work I love, and I see my daughter. That I have a chance to start over with a clean slate. Isn't that a victory? Sometimes people ask, would you ever forgive such a betrayal? Honestly, I don't know. Everyone decides for themselves what is more important, revenge or peace, justice or forgiveness. I chose justice because I knew that if I let them off easily, they would continue. They would find another victim, come up with a new plan. This way, at least for 11 years, they will be sitting and thinking about what they did. The lesson I learned from this story is simple. Trust is a fragile thing. It's easy to break and nearly impossible to restore. Sherry and Dev broke my trust over 2 years of deceit, and now they are paying for it with their freedom. And I am paying with loneliness and the pain of lost years. But I am still here. I am still living. And that's the main thing. This evening, I'll sit on the porch again, drink my tea, watch the sunset, and maybe call Natalie and invite her for a walk. Life goes on. Slowly, cautiously, but it goes on. And who knows, maybe something good awaits me, something real. Without lies, without betrayal. Just life. An ordinary human life? And isn't that what we all want? I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.